friend suggested that I cover Mormonism, which I will do in this video. The main point that I want to cover in this video is the spiritual origination of the Mormon Church, which I believe is occultic and essentially a bull cult. This is the temple in San Diego. I had an experience with Mormon missionaries. I had a visit to a Mormon temple, and I received a lot of information about their beliefs from a former Mormon colleague. From my research and experience, it seems that Mormonism is not only a false religion that modifies and contradicts the Bible, but it is a cult and a scam and a demonic deception, as most cults are. There are plenty of testimonies of former members online, including those who claim to be SRA victims, which we may be able to see why that would be as we investigate more about them. The Mormon Church was founded in 1830 by Freemason Joseph Smith while living in upstate New York. There were over 17 million members as of December of last year, including almost 70,000 missionaries. The Mormons believed that Joseph Smith died as a martyr, shedding his blood so that the members could become as gods. Smith and other like-minded individuals used the Book of Mormon to justify slavery in the pre-Civil War era. He also had many wives or sex partners, including married women. Second to Smith was Brigham Young, who sired 56 children with 55 wives. BYU is named for Brigham Young. More on Joseph Smith later. As I said, they teach that their members can become gods. Mormon candidates for godhood engage in occult rituals inside what they call as the Holy Mormon Temple. Part of that ritual involves wearing magic underwear. Another requirement is that they must not associate with apostate Mormon members. This is the Mormon Temple in Washington, D.C. This is the one in Salt Lake City, Utah. Their temples have similar architecture to Gothic cathedrals. They also have lots of mirrors in their temples, which they say symbolize destiny and divine nature, but in my research, mirrors are usually used for summoning, and these people do practice scrying and divining. I will cover more about the temples later. The angel on the spire of this temple in many Mormon temples is the angel Moroni. He is an icon of the Mormon Church, son of Mormon. Moroni is said to have been a North American warrior, the last surviving Nephite, who became an angel after he died, they say. Nephites, they claim, migrated to the Americas after the Tower of Babel incident. They say Moroni is the angel in Revelation 14:6. Their story is that Moroni buried the golden plates that are the basis for the Book of Mormon in upstate New York after becoming an angel. And then in 1827, Moroni, in angel form, revealed the location of the golden plates to Joseph Smith. Smith claims that prior to being visited by the angel at age 14, he was also visited by God himself, who Mormons call Elohim, and also Jesus Christ, who told him to start his own religion. Smith claims that another different holy angel named Nephi, Nephi, who the Nephites descend from, gave Smith the means to translate the golden plates from Reformed Egyptian language that they were written in. Nephi was described by Smith as an angel of light. Smith claims that Nephi forbid him to show those plates to anyone until they had been translated from their Reformed Egyptian language. Smith supposedly translated the plates using a seer stone, and a seer stone in that culture was a prevalent divination tool used for a form of crystal gazing or scrying. But the thing about the golden plates is that they can't be verified, because Smith claims that he returned them to Moroni after translation. He says that 11 other prophets saw them, but those people were also likely Freemasons, since a significant number of Mormons in the early days of its inception were Freemasons. But regardless of the fact that many people of the time doubted the existence of those so-called plates, Smith published the Book of Mormon based on that translation in 1830 and established the church, steeped in Western esotericism, including American folk magic. That church was persecuted during the early days of its inception because their practice of polygamy, their doctrine, which seemed to be made up, and their rapid growth. This caused the church to move from New York to Ohio, then Missouri, then Illinois, and eventually to Utah after the martyrdom of Joseph Smith in 1844, when he was killed by an angry mob before his trial, which I think was for heresy. In addition to the Book of Mormon, they also have other doctrinal and revelations supposedly received by Joseph Smith and other church fathers, including the Book of Abraham, which consists of Egyptian scrolls. Some online accounts say that they teach some crazy things, such as the cosmos being ruled by countless gods, and that Elohim is only one of those gods, and that Jesus and Lucifer are Elohim's sons, and that Jesus had 3 wives, Mary, Martha, and Mary Magdalene, and that Jesus had children, and that Joseph Smith is descended from one of the children, which sounds like a lot of other Gnostic teachings. Now, regarding the temple. I visited a Mormon temple in Atlanta, Georgia prior to its rededication because a colleague invited me in 2012. That colleague said that the only way to enter the temple after dedication is to be a Mormon in good standing, meaning that they have abided all the rules, including tithing 10% of their salary, which is verified by tax returns. So this temple, they were giving tours to a lot of people during this time prior to its dedication. So when I went, that was before I was saved, but even then I could sense something very off about the people and the place when I visited. The members involved in that open house acted like they were under a spell. Hypnotized. That's the only way I know how to describe it. The entire thing made me feel very uneasy and uncomfortable, and I'll never forget the way it affected me then. Everyone had to put on plastic over our shoes before entering, and there was plastic all over the furniture. The same artwork you see all over their brochures was all over their temple. I remember they had separate rooms for different meetings and a locker room for people to change into their white clothing. Apparently, the members have to wear all white in the temple, including their undergarments, socks, shoes. Everything has to be white. Supposedly, white clothing symbolizes cleanliness, worthiness, and purity. But the most memorable thing about that temple and the central focus of the temple are their baptismals. And this is what they look like. I think this is the one in Atlanta. Down here at the bottom, you're going to see bulls around. 12 bulls. Can't really see them good here, but they all have it. Here's one. You can see the bulls. Okay. Mormons are encouraged to baptize dead ancestors who have passed prior to being inducted into the Mormon Church. Not their bodies, just their spirit. So they have these bull sculptures in their temple baptismals that hold up the baptismal, and there's 12 bulls around the bottom. They say they represent the 12 tribes of Israel and the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. They say this tradition is based on 2 Chronicles 4:2-4, which describes a similar arrangement in Solomon's temple. And I'm just going to read that now. It reads, "He made a bronze altar 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 10 cubits high. He made the sea of cast metal, circular in shape, measuring 10 cubits from rim to rim and 5 cubits high. It took a line of 30 cubits to measure around it. Below the rim, figures of bulls encircled it, 10 to a cubit. The bulls were cast in 2 rows in one piece with the sea. The sea stood on 12 bulls, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea rested on top of them, and their hindquarters were towards the center." So you see this mirrored here. But bull worship is considered idolatry. In Exodus, the Israelites worshipped the golden calf, which was actually a bull. When Moses saw the Israelites worshiping the calf, he broke the tablets of the law, which symbolized breaking the covenant with God. And why is that? What's the big deal about a bull? Well, Nephilim are associated with bulls, which is the origination of the association of Nephilim to bullies or tyrants. In Psalm 22:12, David laments, "Many bulls surround me. Strong bulls of Bashan encircle me." Bashan was a place of giants, like Og, so David was likely referring to his Nephilim enemies and not animals. Poseidon, the dragon and god or fallen angel of the sea, was personified as a bull and was the father of the bull cult. Merovech, the progenitor of Merovingians, is said to have been fathered by a sea-bull. Bulls were worshipped in Canaan with Moloch. Bulls are worshipped in Mithraism. Giant graves in the shapes of bull heads are on the island of Sardinia in the Mediterranean. Other bull cults included the cults of Osiris, Crete, and Melchizedek. Post-flood, Gilgamesh personified a bull hero, but I want to talk about the bull cult of Melchizedek now. So by the mid-1830s, Smith began teaching on the Melchizedek priesthood. Upon introducing the Melchizedek or high priesthood in 1831, Smith taught that its recipients would be endowed with power from on high. That doctrine of endowment evolved into an elaborate ceremony containing elements similar to those of Freemasonry and the Jewish Kabbalah. Melchizedek is the first Canaanite documented in the Bible. He was the high priest, according to Gnostics and Theosophists. Melchi is derived from Moloch, or king, who was the king of Jerusalem. Moloch is synonymous with Malik, meaning king. Moloch was a demigod, son of Baal. Baal was a son of Dagon in Canaanite and Mesopotamian pantheons who popularized the bull cult into the Middle East. Zedek, a rebellious sun god, a Canaanite deity worshipped in pre-Israelite Jerusalem. The story of Melchizedek gives validity to the priesthood and titles connected with the Second Temple during the reign of Herod. Baal and related deities were by and large portrayed as mating bulls symbolizing fertility. But it's the bull cult aspect that is important. Solomon built an altar to Moloch at Topheth. Solomon did evil in the eyes of God, for Solomon worshipped outlawed gods such as Astaroth and Moloch, building a high place for Moloch, recorded as Shamash in 1 Kings 11:1-8. The connections between the bulls and the Mormon baptismal to the Temple of Solomon are clear, considering the Canaanite builder-craftsmen were commissioned by Phoenician King Hiram of Tyre to build the first Jerusalem temple for Solomon. The contemporary Masonic order of Melchizedek follows the Canaanite order. So after I was saved in 2013, when I was a baby Christian and knew nothing about the Mormonism except for the experience that I had visiting the temple a few years earlier with my colleague, some Mormon missionaries came to my home. I was curious and I let them in. They visited me a total of 3 times, trying to recruit me into their church. My experience is that their pitch is very tricky because at first they tell you they follow the Bible and then gradually they reveal their beliefs that do not correspond with the Bible. At the time I didn't know much and I didn't know not to really engage with these people, but I knew enough and I've always had spiritual discernment even before I was saved. Eventually these missionaries revealed that they have beliefs that are different than the Bible. They believe in different levels or kingdoms in the afterlife, but that doesn't include hell. They do have outer darkness, which I assume is bad. Then they have the lowest level, which is the telestial level, reserved for people who only follow civil laws. Then they have the terrestrial level, occupied by those who followed the laws of Moses. And then the celestial level, where they say God and Jesus live. And also those who follow their laws get to reside once they die. They say that once you arrive in the celestial kingdom, you become a god. And this is where male Mormon members engage in endless celestial sex with thousands of goddesses. And if they fail to adhere to the strict Mormon requirements, the males risk castration before getting into that celestial planet. They believe that Jesus was a god, but that humans can also become gods. They also believe that the God Elohim is both male and female. They do not believe in hell, and in fact, on the third visit, these missionaries brought a closer with them, a non-missionary Mormon member of the local church, who had a son my age, and she was brought to talk to me about the programs for the children, etc. And when I mentioned to these women that I did not believe that there's no hell, the strangest thing happened. I told them I do believe there's a hell, and they all three glitched in the same way. It was like I struck a nerve in whatever spirit was in them, and they were all like, oh, no, there's no hell. And it was really weird. So at that point, I just made up an excuse not to join their church, saying that I couldn't go without coffee, and that was the deal breaker, and then they left. But prior to that last visit with the missionaries, when I was trying to learn about Mormonism, I called up my former colleague and I asked if I could ask him some questions about their religion. And he said sure, and he invited me to his house. So I went and I met his family. And that was also very bizarre. The mother seemed to be in a trance the entire time. She acted hypnotized, similar to the people that I encountered at the temple. One of the children acted possessed and spent the entire time in a chair with his feet behind his head. The house was extremely dirty. And I'm not saying that that was because of them being Mormon. Besides the hypnotic countenance, I do think that is related to their cult. That former Mormon colleague also wrote science fiction on the side, which seems to be another attribute of those with false doctrines and seems to correspond with what I received or what I reviewed about the cosmology of the early Mormon church fathers also, and it also corresponds with Kabbalistic doctrines. My colleague informed me that his two oldest children were learning Japanese to become Mormon missionaries, which is encouraged at age 18 for boys, 19 for girls. It may be required, I'm not sure about that part. But he told me that the parents have to fund most of their missionary travel and expenses. But the church picks where they will go, and then they have to learn the language prior. Their church leadership is organized in a hierarchical pyramid-type structure across the world. At the top is the president, being designated as a prophet, a seer, and a revelator. Then there are the apostles, then administrators who oversee finances and properties, etc. And then it goes on down to being organized locally with bishops and so forth. I've noticed a pattern with these false religions. They require their members to pay a lot to be a part of the church community, so-called. The Mormon church has huge investment accounts. They use free labor in the form of volunteers and are tax exempt. They are constantly buying vast amounts of land and developing real estate across the United States. They own 2% of Florida, and they own the largest cattle farm in the United States. Aside from all of that, if the members have to tithe 10% of their income, I figured out that based on an average annual salary of $70,000, 10% of that per year is $7,000 per member. Based on 17 million members, that equals $119 billion per year. Thanks for listening.